Welcome back, YouTube. As you can see, the blue STI is back out at the shop. I had planned on keeping it in the garage at the house, but some house projects came up and it's a little more convenient to relocate the furniture and things into the garage at the house than to try and leave them in the living room and whatnot. So we went ahead and brought the blue STI back out here to the shop. It is temporary. It's car show season, so I don't plan on leaving it out here to get all the shop dust on it. I plan on leaving it in the garage at home and keeping it nice and fresh so I can have a nice appearance for the blue STI while I'm out at the car shows. Less detailing I need to do in between events and whatnots. In today's video, we are going to be working on the T100. I highly doubt you're going to be able to see it at this angle, but when unbagging the T100, I did notice that the entire bedside here has some pretty decent scratches in it and gouges. I have no idea, trees, bushes, fence, pole, I don't know, my grandfather probably scraped something. Either way, while I still have all the detailing supplies out from doing the Frontier, I figured now is a great time to go ahead and polish out the bed, see if I can't get these out before I put all of that away. Let me get you spun around here and get you a better view as to what this looks like. I will go ahead and say now that I would go ahead and de-stripe the vehicle to get the buffing in here. Otherwise, I would just go ahead and burn the pinstripe right off the truck. But when we sprayed the truck, we actually painted the pinstripe under the clear so that my grandfather would never have to worry about this red stripe ever fading and coming off. It's part of the base coat at this point. So I can just go ahead and buff right over this and we'll be good to go. For fixing the scratches on the side of the truck today, I think I'm gonna do a little more of a descriptive teaching type thing while I go through this process, kind of explain to you what I'm gonna do, why I'm gonna do it, show you the before and after. Hopefully it'll come out on the camera. I won't really know till after I record this. Some of you may already be well aware of this process. Some of you may not. And what seems pretty standard and common to me and what I've always done may not be for somebody who's never done this and never been part of this world. And as you saw in the Frontier videos, and if you didn't, link down below, go ahead and watch those videos. It's been a while since I've buffed and polished and cut paint. I'm by no means an expert at this at all. Definitely hobby level at what I'm doing. Product selection I have for detailing cars is just generic, what you can get from the local auto parts store. Nothing crazy about anything I'm using here. The paint stuff was a little different, but that's painting. Detailing stuff is just what you can get from local hobby stores or local car part stores. So first step to do the bed is I'm gonna need to wash it, obviously. The bed is dirty. I don't know when the last time this truck was washed was. So I'm not gonna wash the whole truck. Obviously it's like 11 o'clock at night right now, and I do not feel like washing a truck at night. So I just have a good old bucket. I know I'm gonna get a little bit hay for this, but I do have just a shop rag in here. I know shop rag is not what you're supposed to be using to wash a vehicle with, but given that I'm about to go polish this afterwards, I'm not too terribly worried, even in the slightest, if I scratch this paint while washing it with that rag. I also have no idea what's on the side of this truck from however long it's been since the last wash. So the last thing I want to do is pull out one of the nice microfibers and get whatever's in here embedded in that microfiber and then have to just throw it away. So I'm just going to use a shop rag for now to get started, get all the top layer of grime off. And if I still need to go a little bit deeper after that, I'll grab a microfiber out and go a little bit deeper. But I'm going to get you thrown up on the tripod and get the time lapse going so that you can watch me wash your truck. Be back in a minute. Wasn't all that bad actually. I ended up using the microfiber towel to dry all of this off. There really wasn't all that much stuff on there like I thought it was going to be. Some of the spots that were definitely spots that I was going to have to spend a little bit more attention on came right off. So I'm wondering if that last polish and wax job that we did on it a while ago is actually holding up really well because all that grime and stuff just came right off. So yes, there are scratches in it, but other than that, all that dirt and random tree sap and bird stuff just wiped right off this truck. So I'm pretty excited about that. So I'm gonna go ahead and move over to grabbing out the buffer and all the polishing stuff and take you through that process. So what I am going to walk you through process-wise is by no means the only way to do this, nor is it probably the most correct way to do this. It is just what I have and what I'm going to do. So here we have a buffer. Let's see. This is a 7-inch variable speed polisher. It is variable between 0 RPM and 3000 RPM. Honestly, I'm not really a fan of this style right here. I really like the DeWalt's that have the trigger speed control for RPM. This just has a digital readout and then some buttons to increase and lower the RPMs. Not really a fan of it. But it seems to work, and honestly, it's what I have. So it's what we're going to use. For the first step, we are going to be using the wool pad. It is just a bunch of wool fibers into a Velcro pad. You can see right there, Velcro, wool and Velcro. And we're going to be using this turtle wax rubbing compound. Now again, this isn't the best rubbing compound in the world. It's not the worst rubbing compound in the world. It is a rubbing compound that I happen to have. When I run out of this, I will probably be picking up something else. I'm not really a fan of this one, but it works, so that's what I'll be using. Now, I don't prefer to try and pour the rubbing compound out of this bottle. The tips that are on them and the holes that are on them are usually quite large. There you go. Usually quite large and hard to control and hard to not just put huge globs out. You also kind of have that catch-up problem where if you leave the bottle this way, it all runs to the bottom, and then you got to like shake it all down, and then you worry about that like spillage when you open the lid. So I always leave them stored this way, so the compound's all the way in the bottom. And then I pick up a bunch of these, super cheap. You can get them pretty much anywhere. But permanent marker, what's inside of it. Obviously, I don't care about the name, brand, just what type of compound's inside of it. And then I go ahead and fill this up with however much I need. Obviously, I'll shake this if it starts to separate because I've had it out for too long and the chemical starts separating in it. Just give it a little shake to put them all back together before we pour it in here. But having this smaller tip on that, if I can get you in there, there you go. Having the smaller tip on that right there helps make it significantly easier to pour out onto the vehicle in a more controlled manner than just the globs that this comes out with. So as you can see, this is not a new wool pad. This is the same wool pad that we used on the Frontier. I have not washed it yet, so it does still have some of the 3M Perfected cutting compound on here, which is a little more aggressive than the rubbing compound that we're about to use. But since it is dried on here, if I was to try and use this right now, it's just going to be a mess and just leave a bunch of marks. So they make a few different tools to try and freshen up your wool pads. I've never had much luck using those tools. Just a can opener and or a flathead. Basically anything that's metal, hard, non-flexible that you can use to just push down gently on the wool pad while it's spinning. And it'll like catch this material right here. And you'll see a lot of this compound just kind of flying off and hitting the ground while you do this. So I'm gonna attempt to set you up in a way that you can watch me do that. All right, so when I do this, again, compound is just gonna go flying everywhere. So I wanna try and set this up so that I'm not throwing compound at you and I'm not throwing compound up in my face. Preferably I'd like it to go down on the ground. So we'll turn this on. A low speed. And I'm just going back and forth from the outside to the inside. I'm trying to do it on the edge that's going to throw the product down on the ground. All right. There you go. So probably didn't get all of it out of there, like a good washing would do, but it is definitely refreshed enough to go ahead and use for the rubbing compound. So I have seen two schools of thought on putting product down from all the time that I've spent in body shops. There are guys that prefer to do like little dots of product in the area that they're about to buff. And the dot method, I don't know. I think it'll be fine. It's not something I'm really used to doing. I prefer to use the line method. Basically just putting a line of product that should be about the amount of product that you're going to need for the area you're about to buff. Just put a line on there, and then as you're buffing, you just kind of slowly pass over to grab a little more product and continue buffing, and grab a little more product, continue buffing, and off you go. Dots are fine too. You just got to remember that your dots exist, and when you go to buff on your dots, try and be careful how close you get to the dot, because if the outside of the wheel gets too close to the dot, it'll fling the dot right off the truck. So that's why I try and not use the dot method, because I can never remember and keep track, and I'll fling these things all over the truck. So I'm gonna get you set up on the time lapse now, and you can see buffing this truck. So in that last clip, I realized I didn't actually explain to you, if you've never done this before, what I was doing and why I was doing it and how I was doing it. I just kind of went right into it, not even thinking about it. So I'm gonna backpedal a little bit here and kind of re-explain or explain for the first time what that was. Hopefully you can see this on the camera, but there are scratches right here in the clear coat. It doesn't appear that the scratch has gone through the clear coat and is down to the base coat, or even under the base coat down to the sealer and the primers. I believe it's just in the clear coat. And what we're doing with this rubbing compound here is it's basically a sandpaper. This polish that's in here, if you were to feel it between your fingers, it does have a little bit of almost like a sand in your lotion type feeling. Not as abrasive as actual sand in your lotion. It's really fine crystals of sand. I'm sure it's not sand. I'm sure it's some sort of proprietary blend of herbs and spices. But there is some sort of grit in this lotion here. And when we're spinning it with the buffer pad, or we're spinning it with a dual action orbital pad, which is a little different than this buffer, but same thing. When you're spinning it, you're kind of like scratching the clear coat. Instead of scratching it by hand, you're scratching it with power tools instead. Get done a little bit faster. But you're sanding it. So just like you would sand with sandpaper, except you're sanding with a grit inside of a lotion. And it's such a fine grit that the human eye really can't perceive it that well. You may notice black cars around town. Looks like there's circles in a straight line all down the side of it or across the hood or just somewhere pretty obvious. It's like just a circle mark all the way through it. They're called swirls. Swirls are what happens when process is done wrong and the scratches that are getting put into it are so heavy that you can see it with the naked eye. Now, black cars, just the nature of a black car and how highly reflective it is, you're gonna see swirl marks real easy in a black car versus a sand color like this or a silver. They hide scratches really well. So if I swirl this, I don't think anybody would ever notice. When I go to buff this, the pad here is going to spin in a specific direction. Let's see if you can get this on camera. See, it spins in this direction right here. So when I am going over the compound, I'm remembering the direction that it's gonna spin in, and I'm very, very minutely twisting it and picking it up so that the leading edge of the direction of the rotation, this would be the leading edge, so that the leading edge is slightly elevated off the paint. Obviously not this dramatically, but slightly elevated off the paint, so that as I'm going, the compound will get sucked up under the pad and it'll hit somewhere around here as the pad is spinning this direction. So the compound will get caught in the fiber and then get pulled down and into the center of the wheel. And then we'll just continue going in that manner. Now there will be a point where this pad is saturated so much with compound that when I do that, nothing's really gonna happen. The compound's gonna hit the pad can't absorb anymore, and it's just gonna fling the compound everywhere. It's gonna get all over me, all over the truck, all over the floors. It's a mess when you start flinging and splattering compound everywhere. So this is one of the reasons why I prefer the straight line method over the dot method, is so I can control that angle to make sure that it is coming into this pad at the appropriate angle so I don't sling it everywhere. Another thing that I didn't really point out while I was doing this is when I'm buffing, I am buffing as flat as I possibly can. There are some guys that will do edge buffing, obviously not as extreme as this. That'll just rip through paint. But a slight angle where you're buffing with the outer edges of the buffer. There will be times while doing this in this video that I may rotate and lean this a little more towards the outside edge while buffing. So that was a whole lot of explanation. I hope that made sense to anybody that was watching. If it didn't, shoot me a comment or DM and I will gladly explain this a little more to you. If you are a professional and know what you're doing, and this is completely wrong and just complete BS, call me out on it, drop a comment, let me know what I'm doing wrong. There may be newer, better, greater ways of doing this than the way that I learned, I don't know, 15 years ago now at this point. So I'm gonna set you back up on the time lapse and I'm gonna get to going on the rest of this truck and I'll bring you back in a minute. All right, so I figured I'd bring you in for a little bit closer of a look here. So right here, you can see there is a line here. I've got you super close for a reason. So I'm gonna follow this a little bit, right? And you can still see how that's there. And I can only see it, and there you go. I can only see it in certain angles of the light playing with this light fixture right here. Because when you back out, I don't know if we're still in focus. There we go, we're still in focus. So you can't really see it. There you go. There's a hint of it right there. So you can still see it a little bit. So I'll get at that section a little bit more. But main thing I wanted to bring you in here for, let's see if I can get it back in focus. So the main thing I wanted to bring you back in here for was another little technique to see if this is a scratch that you think you can get out or not. So I don't really know a whole lot of the science behind this, but for whatever reason, your fingernail can actually detect minute changes significantly better than your eyeballs. So whereas my eye can see this, right? My eye knows there's a scratch here. When I use my finger test, my finger can't even feel it. So whatever scratch is here can 100% be buffed out because it's not an actual scratch in the clear coat. Yes, it is a scratch in the clear coat, but it is such a fine scratch that buffing it will get it out. And what I mean by that is this guy right here. So let's see if we can refocus you. So this guy right here, it is very clearly a black scratch. And it's not black, it's the same scratches as everything else. However, when I run my finger across it, that is my fingernail getting caught in this line. So because my fingernail can get caught in that line, that scratch is so deep, I am probably not gonna be able to buff it out. And considering the color that this scratch is, I'm willing to bet this scratch is under the base metallic coat and is down to the sealer, if not all the way down to the primer or the raw metal. It's not super shiny, so I don't think it's down to the metal. I think it's just down to the sealer coat, but it is definitely a significant scratch. You can hear that. That is significant. That's not going anywhere. I will try and buff it anyway, just to see how much I can minimize it. But for my capabilities, I cannot get that out. That is going to be there. But I'll come back down here, and I don't know if I can even get it back in frame again. This guy, right, or whatever. There's one right here-ish. There you go. So I'll go ahead and rebuff this guy, and I'll definitely get this guy out. So I'm gonna set you back on the time lapse and keep going at it. So one other thing I did want to point out. So I know just moments ago I said that you want to keep this pad as flat as possible. Well, you'll notice up in this area where most of my scratches are, that's not really possible. If I keep it flat, I'm not gonna actually get the scratches. I'm gonna be pushing down here on the flare out for the bed. It's hard to see from this angle, but there is a flare on this bed. All right, so if I match the alignment of the body panel, at some point right here, I'm hitting the flare. And if I stay completely flat and I come up, I'm no longer hitting the area that's scratched. You did see in that last footage at some point that I was using the edge of the buffer. Now, knowing that I was using the edge of the buffer, I did pull it off a little bit and relieve that pressure so that even though I was spinning at that full speed and full RPM and full inches per minute per revolution on the scratches, I had as minimal pressure on it as possible so I couldn't do too much damage. And the only other thing I did in the video that I didn't cover before I did it was when I got up to this guy, you'll probably notice that I went ahead and I opened this up as I buffed my way down this way. I've had one too many experiences. Oops, sorry about that, that was loud. I've had one too many experiences where I've buffed too close to this and had the door kind of do like a flutter thing and get caught in the wool pad and just be a nightmare. So it's a whole lot easier to just open this real quick before I get here. And as I'm buffing flat, I just kind of buff over this area. And since there's nothing here, I can't scratch or buff any of this. There is an edge, obviously, and you don't want to burn the edge. But if you stay flat, like I was showing earlier, you stay nice and flat, you won't burn through that edge. And it'll let you get up nice and close without catching the door. So the camera is most likely going to have a really hard time picking up and showing you the subtle differences between the before scratch side and the non-scratch side now. Still not done, still need to have a whole nother step, but the rubbing compound step is done on the majority of those scratches, with the exception of the two I showed earlier, seem to have been taken care of. You will want to check your wool pad every once in a while. If you happen to miss any bit of that dirt and grime, this is what it's going to do to your wool pad. And that rubbing compound that's embedded into these fibers in here is going to pick up that dirt and grime. And then as you go to buff, you're not going to be using rubbing compound anymore. You're going to be using rubbing compound plus dirt and grime. and has a real high chance of introducing scratches that you don't want to have to try and get out. So make sure you stop every once in a while, check your pad, see if it needs to be cleaned, which we did earlier. Now that we are done with the rubbing compound and the wool pad here, we are going to switch over to a polishing compound with a foam pad. This foam pad is already used. This is the one we just used off the Frontier. Again, haven't taken them home and cleaned them yet, but it does have the polishing compound already preloaded into it from doing the Frontier. There are two different types here. This one right here, as you can see, is nice and flat, whereas this one is honeycombed or whatever this waffle texture here is. Not really sure the technical differences between the two. I use them as I need to. This one I use for when I need to have something a little bit more aggressive, even though I'm still using the same polishing compound. If I want it to cut a little more coarsely, I'll use one of the flat ones versus one of these ones. They do come in different types of materials, and each one of these has a different level of stiffness to them. I'm sure there are technical gradients for what these are and when to use these, but I'm not knowledgeable enough to even have a remote clue as to which one to use. I know if I'm really trying to be gentle, I try and stick with these and one of the squishier, softer ones. And if I want to be more aggressive and assertive, I'll grab one of the thicker, harder ones, like this orange one right here. It's pretty firm. And I'll use one of the firmer pads if I want to be more aggressive. And I mentioned earlier about swirl marks for black cars. This stuff so far has been phenomenal. I'm sure there are other products that work just as well. And I won't need to use this on this truck because the truck's not black. But this stuff right here thrown on my dual action orbital completely removes any problems I have in the black paint on the black STI. Awesome stuff right here. We're gonna go get this thrown onto the polisher and we're gonna repeat all the steps that we just did using this compound. All this is really gonna do is make that, that reflectiveness of the clear coat just pop a little bit more. It's gonna make it a little more vibrant, a little more reflective. I'll try and get the camera up here to show you. I don't know if the camera's gonna be able to pick it up or not, but just know that the rubbing compound is your step one, your polishing compound is step two. So if you already couldn't see the scratch marks from the rubbing compound, you're without a doubt not gonna see the scratch marks from the polishing compound, but it is the next step after the rubbing compound. Compound step is done. You're not really going to see a difference in the lighting I have in here. And even up close, the camera doesn't even remotely pick up the differences on it. You will see some spots in this area. There's still a lot of product left. When you're not as out of practice as I am, you won't leave as much product on the vehicle while you're buffing. The product will just kind of disappear because you have the proper amount of product for what you're doing. In my case, obviously, a lot of product left over. So what I have to go do now at this point is I need to go grab a brand new microfiber and gently polish out or remove any of the extra product that's still left on the panel. And after it's microfibered off, we will wax it. All right, with all that product removed, hopefully now you can see how much shinier the whole side of this truck is. Last step in our process here after the rubbing and the polishing compound is wax. You need to throw a coat of wax on it to seal up or put a protective layer on top of the clear coat. Gives you a 3 to 6 month protective coat depending on where you are, and bugs and dirt and grime and a lot of variables into whether this stuff's going to last you 2 weeks or 6 months. Considering how this truck sits inside for the most part right now until I can get it fixed, this should last us a little while. Now, some of you are going to wonder why I'm using classic old school carnauba wax versus using a ceramic. For this truck, where it's at for today's project, we're just going to use a standard carnauba wax. I'm not going to attempt to strip all this down and prepare this for ceramic and go through the whole ceramic process. It's like 2 in the morning right now, and I really don't feel like dealing with ceramic. So for wax, you can do this by hand. I used to do this by hand, pain in the butt. I upgraded to an orbital. It's a dual action orbital, which means it doesn't only spin in one direction. It spins in like a dual action rotating pattern. It's weird. You have to look up how dual action rotates. But basically, it doesn't just rotate in a circle. It has like a rotating, vibrating type thing that it does, so that you don't burn the paint like you could with the polisher. For mine, I have 3 different pads here. Again, you could use this DA orbital for polishing and for rubbing compounds. This is the same type of wool mat as the one for the buffer. But because it's a DA instead of an orbital or instead of a polisher, the DA is not going to be as harsh. So for what I'm doing right now, it's just a lot easier to grab out the polisher than to try and deal with the DA. But without a doubt, you can use it. We also have like a terry cloth type material. You can see this one's a little bit dirty. This is the normal one that I use. I have a few of them, but these are the ones that I use to apply my waxes. And then this one right here is just a microfiber. I'll use the microfiber to remove the wax once it dries. Kind of cheating to do it this way, but I've done waxes by hand for years and I'm kind of over it. I use an orbital now. Orbital to put it on, orbital to take it off. And then the towel right here, this microfiber, massive microfiber towel to do a final hand job of getting rid of any wax that's left over. So let me get all this set up, set you back on the tripod, and wax the truck. There she is, all waxed up and looking fresh. All right, so I'm gonna get you a nice pan here so you can see what it looks like now that we're done. All right, so that's gonna be a wrap for this video. We have the truck taken care of. It is looking mint again. Obviously, I still have to wash and wax and buff and polish the whole rest of the truck now. That's an adventure for another day. I just definitely wanted to get those huge scratches that I saw taken care of. So now that the paint's pretty squared away again, I think just a normal wash and wax will take care of the rest of it. Hopefully in an upcoming video, we can get the power steering rack replaced in that so it stops leaking all over the place. Then we can start driving that thing around, maybe take that to some car shows. Yeah, thanks for watching and hope to see you in the next episode.